So welcome everyone. Welcome to the Ageing Society's Global Perspectives Forum, being brought together today by the International Standards Organisation Technical Committee 314 Ageing Societies. I'm Anne Livingstone and I'm the convener of the ISOTC 314 Ageing Societies Communications Group, and I will be your facilitator for today's forum. By way of background, the International Organisation for Standardisation was officially formed in 1947. Today, the organisation serves as an independent, non-governmental international organisation that brings together experts to share knowledge and develop voluntary, consensus-based, market-relevant and market-driven international standards. And these standards support innovation and provide solutions to global standards and challenges. Our first speaker today will cover how this is playing out for the Technical Committee 314 Ageing Societies and for our comprehensive work in this important global challenge. Before we move on to presentations, let me please cover some housekeeping items for today's webinar. To ensure you have the best experience through our forum, I just remind all participants that your microphones have been muted, but that doesn't mean you can't ask questions. During the event, please post these questions in the Q&A panel. We have a moderator behind the scenes who will be looking at those questions and ensuring they're answered either immediately through the chat pane or at the end of the session when all our panelists come together to do a live Q&A session. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available in the coming days. Please ensure that your computer volume is on maximum to hear all the presentations today as clearly as possible. So welcome again, and it's my great privilege to be able to introduce the chair of TC314 Ageing Societies, Ms. Britta Berge. Now that we have our first speaker on board, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce her. Ms. Berge is the Vice President and Chief of Staff of Policy, Strategy and International Affairs at AARP. AARP is a large non-profit organisation that seeks to empower people to choose how they live as they age. In this organisation, Ms. Berge has worked on comparative health and ageing policy, global ageing, program management and strategic operations. Ms. Berge serves as the chair of the Technical Committee 314 of the International Standards Organisation and in particularly in our work in ageing societies. Her presentation today will cover the work of this Technical Committee and its formation. Today, Britta is presenting from Washington, DC. Welcome, Britta.
The whole world is aging, and aging rapidly. By 2015, 1 in 6 people will be over the age of 65, which is up from 1 in 11 in 2019. 2018 marked the first time in history people over the age of 65 outnumbered children under 5 globally. The number of people 80 years or over is projected to triple in the next 30 years, from 143 million to 426 million by 2050. As these numbers illustrate, rapid demographic change is happening across the globe. And while some countries may be ahead of the curve or super aging, other parts of the world are quickly catching up. This massive demographic transformation will increasingly affect individuals, families, communities, governments, and businesses. But we have a chance to ride this wave as we look to the opportunities that aging societies present by finding innovative solutions, guidelines, tools, and best practices. And this is where international standardization comes in. Standards support governments, communities, and businesses by providing guidance on new products, services, and solutions. TC314 aims to address these challenges and opportunities of aging societies through the development of international standards. But ISO's work around aging societies didn't start with TC 314. First, there was an international workshop agreement, IWA 18, called Framework for Integrated Community-Based Lifelong Health and Care Services in Aged Societies. The IWA first explored challenges facing societies around the needs of an aging population. IWA 18 led to the creation of the ISO Strategic Advisory Group, or SAG, on aging societies. The SAG confirmed the need and the strategic direction for future standardization in this area. From there, TC 314 was established in late 2017, building on this foundation. And we've begun this work in earnest. We published a strategic business plan determining the scope and outlining priority areas for developing standards. We launched 3 working groups and are adding more work groups as the work of the TC expands. We also have 3 task groups: communications, terminology coordination, and a strategic advisory group for the TC. Right now is a very exciting moment for us in that each of our current work groups are in the final stages developing standards to be published. And I want to share the titles of these 3 standards with you. From work group 1, General Requirements and Guidelines for an Age-Inclusive Workforce. From work group 2, Framework for Dementia-Inclusive Communities. And from work group 3, General Requirements and Guidelines for Care-Inclusive Organizations. I just want to pause and congratulate the working group conveners, secretaries, and members who have worked tirelessly to bring this work to fruition. And we are already moving forward with new areas of work, notably around health and well-being, home-based care, and others, which you'll hear more about today. And I believe my colleague Nele will share more about what's ahead for our TC. I also want to acknowledge how the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the importance of our work, as older people have been disproportionately affected, particularly those in communal living arrangements such as care homes or assisted living. This has really shined a light on these issues and provides an opportunity to engage more stakeholders to advance this important work. Finally, there's so many benefits to the work that we're undertaking. We expect that many standards aimed at addressing the needs of aging societies will actually benefit everyone. For example, workplace flexibility benefits all workers, even while accounting for the longer lifespan of workers. Building an age-inclusive workforce will give all workers a longer and more fulfilling working life, not just those in their 50s and 60s today. In many cases, designing for one population can be universally beneficial. My favorite example is how designing for people with disabilities led to curb cutouts on the sidewalk. This not only benefits those with wheelchairs, but those with strollers, bikes, or carts as well. Ultimately, these standards are really global solutions, which will help people remain active in fulfilling lives, which allows them to contribute economically and socially for as long as possible. Lastly, I want to note how our work aligns with other actors in the global aging space. For example, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our work aligns with 9 of the SDGs, looking at things like well-being, secure working environments, public spaces, and transportation, and the social, economic, and political inclusion of all. WHO has been a huge leader in this space. The Global Network for Age-Friendly Cities and Communities, which was established in 2010, provided a policy framework to develop place-based leadership and global exchange. The 2016 Action Plan on Aging and Health, and of course the Decade of Action on Healthy Aging, which is 2020 to 2030, in particular very closely aligns with the goals and vision of our work. Areas such as age-friendly environments, combating ageism, health and long-term care. And of course, there are other organizations and many global efforts underway with which we try to align and make connections with key stakeholders as broadly as possible. You'll hear more about that in a few minutes from my colleague, Nele. In the meantime, I invite you to join us on this journey and engage with the work of TC 314 as we focus on aging societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Britta, for a great overview of TC314 and our work to date. It's my pleasure to now introduce our next speaker. But before I do that, just a reminder, please place your questions in the Q&A panel. We will try to get to as many questions during the presentations and at the end of the presentations, as I mentioned earlier, when the panel comes on board. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Nele Zgavc. Nele has been a great cornerstone to all our work for such a long time over the transition from starting to now almost finalising the standards. Nele is the lead standards development manager at British Standards Institution. She is also the committee manager for TC314. Nele's joining us from London today and will be covering the main strategic intents of the work of TC314 Ageing Societies. Welcome, Nele, and over to you.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to have a brief step backwards of what Britta was talking about. She started introducing the benefits of all the standards that we're going to be creating, but I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page of what we actually mean by a standard. So when we talk about a standard, we talk about internationally agreed good practices. So that can take the shape of many different things. So it can be in the shape of requirements. So you might be familiar with things like ISO 9001 for quality management, very popular standard. But then we'll also be moving more into the more people-focused type of standards, which are more recommendations. So they give you some ideas of how to approach things and what you should take into consideration. And when we're developing these standards, all the views need to be taken on board. So it's a consensus-based approach from all the experts of the different fields and different countries coming together. And finally, I just wanted to highlight that all of these standards also go through a stage of public consultation. So if you're listening today and there's a particular topic coming up in the future that you have an interest in, but you don't have the time to necessarily participate actively, you can still provide your comments during those stages. So keep an eye out on our website for that. Sorry, thought that would click. There we go. So we work in the platform of ISO, which means that there's 165 potential members that can participate. So each country sends their own experts to these technical committees that they want to participate in, and they can actually decide what that standard is going to look like, or even propose new standards to be developed to that technical committee. And all of that is managed in Geneva by ISOCS, which sets out kind of the rules of engagement. So how are we actually going to be developing these standards, and what do we have to keep in mind when developing a standard? So all of that work goes through a development track that's kind of set out for each project. So to make sure that every member gets a chance to vote and give their opinion, whether or not they think it's ready for publication, what kind of things need to be changing in terms of what their experts think, or what from their experience or that background is more important to be covering, and so forth. So each of these documents goes through this development stage in order to have a good publication at the end of the day that reflects actually international good practice. So as I mentioned, stakeholder views are of key importance. So you'll find both at national level and at international level that you'll see these kind of stakeholders participate. So you have the person that you would expect there, of course, the industry expert, professional expert, but we also have people coming from academia, even regulators, consumer advocates, charities, you name it, you can think of it, they're probably involved in some shape or form in the development of these standards. And that is particularly important when we look at aging societies. So aging societies sits in the middle of so many different topics for standardization. So just think about human resources, occupational health and safety, sustainability of communities, security and resilience. All of these things will have an impact on an older person. So we need to make sure that if another technical committee is developing standards, they need to take into consideration there might be some special needs to take into account. we need to make sure that as we grow older, we retain the access to all of the services we need, that we have products that are fit for our needs, and that we can retain, for instance, employment opportunities for as long as we would possibly want them. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to influence not only what we're developing, but what other technical committees are developing as well. And as Britta pointed out, one of the key highlights that we've seen from this pandemic is that certain standards, even those for emergency responses, are not necessarily geared up to take into consideration a more vulnerable person in the society. So hopefully all of that highlighting has forced us into making some changes for the good of everybody. And of course, we can't do this work without engaging the right people. So we have just started on this journey of actually getting in touch with all of the different kind of organizations that we need to take into account during this development. So of course, we have the organizations that are important of the work that we're currently doing. So think about dementia-related organizations, care organizations, labor-related organizations. They're really key right now, and maybe for some of the topics that are going to be coming up. But then we've also been reaching out to the more overarching organizations, such as, for instance, the United Nations and WHO, because we see the importance of the research that they've done and the recognition of the information that they provide. So we are always making sure that if we're developing something, how does that reflect what is in the documents of these organizations, so that we're all kind of aligned. That's our aim. But we also have to involve some organizations that maybe in the past weren't so involved with standards. So think about, for instance, social entrepreneurs or even AARP. I don't know if they were in the past developing standards themselves, but we would definitely want to hear what kind of things they have to offer us. So if you're listening today or to the recording and you find yourself in one of these categories, or you think that it relates to aging societies in some shape or form, please reach out to me and we'll see how we can work together, either as a member from the national committee to lead into the international work, or from an organization that we can set up some kind of a liaison partnership with. So at the moment we have 22 participating countries that provide their expertise and 17 observers. So we hope that that will grow as more people become aware of our work. So if you do know someone from a country that is yet to be involved, don't hesitate to ask questions of how you can become a participating country. So now we delve into a bit of the detail of where we're heading for the future. So Britta has already highlighted the 3 standards under development. So that's in the area of dementia, inclusiveness, care inclusiveness, and aging workforce. But we're also going to be digging into the topics of health promotion and preventative care, multi-generational communities, social connectedness. And then on the bottom of the screen, you see 3 topics. So that's universal design, accessibility, and importantly, technology, as topics that are also key, but a bit more complex, because there's already existing standards in place or existing technical committees. So this is a project where we're going to be working together a lot more, and it takes more time to prepare for this. So these are going to be maybe topics that are going to be a little bit more delayed after the other ones, but we hope to get to those very quickly. So some of the projects that we're actively working on to get started. So we have 2 projects actually being balloted for acceptance into the technical committee's work portfolio. 2 of these are from Japan by coincidence. So the first one is a technical report, which means it will not provide recommendations or requirements, but it's a collection of information. And in this case, it's specifically on accessibility and usability considerations for home-based healthcare products, so for older persons or persons with disabilities, and also for related services and environments. We've seen that in the past, there might have been problems where a person lacked the experience or the skills in handling these kind of products. And we want to make sure that the caregivers and care recipients have access to the information that they need, or even allow the developers and distributors to take into consideration some of the feedback that we've been getting on using these products and how they can be improved. Then we have a bit on the completely opposite of the spectrum, where we're looking at communities and organizations as well. So for promoting well-being. So this is based on, so the proposal is based on the concept of healthy aging. So that's really to try and enhance the functional abilities through things like lifelong learning or considerations of how we can embed well-being in a local community, and even how leadership can be developed with using some well-being related services. So this is going to be requirements and guidance for use for establishing, improving, maintaining and reviewing well-being promotion in the local communities and organizations. And then we have some projects currently under discussion, so they're not as far along, but we expect them shortly. So one is from Korea, and this is regarding if you have a handheld device. We see that currently the time to respond to certain dialogues or directions or questions sometimes is not sufficient. So we need to make sure that we can give the guidance on how long it should be before there's some kind of a timeout for responses. So that's quite a detailed project. But then on the other side of the digital field is a Chinese discussion point on guidance for age-inclusive digital economies. And this is really to try and protect the consumers by preventing age-prejudiced practices. So ensuring that we can enhance and make more credible the age-inclusive digital economies, and make sure that that's of a good quality for all interested parties. So specifically for economy providers, organizers, suppliers, but also other stakeholders that will benefit from the end result. And then we have one topic from the United Kingdom that's been developed in partnership with the technical committee itself and also AAA. So we are building a whole research project around this to feed into the standards. So that partnership makes sure that the research that we're doing now will actually underpin the actual proposal and give some practical advice. And that's specifically aimed at accelerating construction of a new kind of building or housing or community that is age-friendly, it's smart, which means that we're going to be looking at socially supportive neighborhoods, but also in a multi-generational setting. It's going to be employing some innovative technologies, but also looking at business and service models that can help us improve health and well-being while also reducing the financial burdens, both on citizens, but also on state. So we expect that to come in towards the end of the year with the report. So you'll find more information on that specific one on our website as well. And then we have two topics that are coming from the technical committee itself. So as Britta mentioned, we have a strategic advisory group that is looking at the future topics for the committee and discussing some problem areas and so forth. So they've highlighted two topics, one of which we've already done an initial workshop to identify the scope. So that is for symbols with guidance for use to support individuals living with disabilities. So this would be a proposal for a technical specification to help an individual living with a disability, and that includes hidden disabilities. So what sometimes hasn't been taken into account when we're looking at a symbol is how would a person with, for instance, dementia understand that symbol? Is that a different understanding than we would have from it? And how can we change those symbols, even sometimes with a small addition, to make sure that that's easily understandable? And how can we present any accompanying information for them to easily understand it? So if you're interested in that one specifically, then reach out to me, because we're going to do another workshop probably in the near future. And then the latest topic that we have identified is long-term care. So this is a topic that we think needs more consideration. So the scope is yet to be defined of what that topic would actually cover. So we're going to do a workshop in the near future again. So if you think this might be of interest to you, even if you're not a member of the committee, but you want to just take part of this workshop, that is very much possible. So I'm just going to pull up my contact information for those people who would like a bit more information about the background, because I don't want to take away too much time of our very exciting speakers for this event. So I'll thank you for your attention and give you back to Anne.
Thank you so much, Nele, for such comprehensive coverage of both the work that we're currently undertaking through TC314, but the range of strategic intents really targeting at key global issues that are affecting all countries and of significant benefit for globalization and standardization for older people. Please join with me in thanking Nele for her contribution, and I look forward to seeing you again, Nele, on the panel discussion. Thank you. Our next speaker is from the World Health Organization. Dr. Nele Fuente is a medical doctor and a public health expert with extensive experience working with international organizations, research institutions, and non-government organizations, particularly in the areas of aging, epidemics and outbreaks, and health research and development. She is the technical officer in WHO, and in this role, she builds capacity on aging and health within the World Health Organization, as well as in countries and regions by developing tools such as situational analysis, delivering training, supporting national policy development and program development to cover the needs, particularly of older populations. She's also currently leading the development of the WHO's global campaign to combat ageism by gathering, synthesizing and distilling evidence to inform effective communication and concrete actions to combat ageism. Welcome, Doctor, and look forward to your presentation on the key perspectives from the World Health Organization. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Daniela Fuente, and I work at the World Health Organization, where I lead the work on the global campaign to combat ageism. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today and to have the opportunity to share the key findings and the key recommendations from the first ever UN Global Report on Ageism, which we launched on the 18th of March of this year. To start the presentation today, I wanted to kick off with the definition of ageism. And this is important because having a shared understanding of the phenomenon is a necessary first step to address it. So when we talk about ageism, we're really referring to how we think, how we feel, and how we act towards others or towards ourselves on the basis of age. So this means that ageism includes three distinct dimensions: stereotypes, how we think; prejudice, how we feel; and discrimination, how we act, again, towards other people, but also towards our own selves on the basis of age. To get started, I also wanted to emphasize that ageism affects people of all ages. And this is important because there seems to be a misconception, at least in some contexts, that ageism only affects older people. And one of the key findings of the report is that ageism actually affects us through our lifetime. Ageism starts early on and it is reinforced over time. So we know that children as young as 4 years of age already become aware of their own culture's age stereotypes, and they start internalizing those stereotypes and use them to guide how they feel and how they act towards people of different ages and also towards themselves. And even if ageism affects us all through our lifetime, it can take different forms depending on our age. I am sure that all of you here today have had at least one experience of ageism at one point in your life. You may have, for example, been ridiculed or made fun of because of your age, or you may have been denied access to healthcare or even a job, again, because of your age. So just important to remember here that ageism affects us all, and it affects us through our lifetime, even if these specific experiences may be different depending on the life stage that we're at. The report also found that ageism is everywhere. It is in our institutions, in our relationships, and also in ourselves. Institutional ageism refers to the laws, the rules, the social norms, the policies and the practices of institutions that unfairly restrict opportunities and systematically disadvantage individuals on the basis of their age. We see ageism across a large number of institutional settings, including health and social care, employment, the legal and the political systems, and many more. And I do encourage you to take a look at the report where we do summarize the best available evidence on the manifestation of ageism across all of these settings. In turn, interpersonal ageism refers to ageism occurring during interactions between two or more individuals. Examples of interpersonal ageism include disrespecting, patronizing, or ignoring individuals on the basis of their age, or not enabling younger and older people to take decisions for themselves when they have the capacity to do so. Finally, self-directed ageism refers to ageism turned against oneself. And this results from this process of internalization of ageist stereotypes that I was mentioning earlier. And basically here what happens is that people internalize those biases from their surrounding culture. And after being repeatedly exposed to those, they also eventually start applying those ageist stereotypes against themselves, limiting what they do or don't do, and also affecting how they perform on specific tasks, for example. We also know that ageism is highly prevalent across countries. What you see on this slide is that 1 in 2 people, or half of the world's population, have moderate or highly ageist attitudes against older people, with rates much higher in low and lower middle income countries. The report also tells us that you're more likely to be ageist against older people if you're male, younger, and if you're less educated, if you fear dying, and if you've had little contact with older people. And you're more likely to experience ageism against older people the older you are, as well as if you're care dependent, and if you happen to live in a country where the healthy life expectancy is much lower, or if you're working in sectors like hospitality or high tech. With regards to ageism against younger people, well, here, unfortunately, we have less data, but in Europe, which is the only region for which we have data on the prevalence of ageism against all age groups, we do see that younger people report more ageism than other age groups. Being female and having poor health means you're more likely to be a target of ageism against younger people. And people are more likely to be ageist against younger people if they've had little contact with other age groups. So up to here, we know that ageism is prevalent and that it affects us all, even if some of us may be more likely to be a target of ageism. But you may be wondering, is ageism harmful? And the quick answer is yes. Ageism is both very harmful and very costly. It has far-reaching impacts on all aspects of our health and well-being when we're older. It's associated with earlier death, as was found in 10 different studies conducted in a range of countries. One of those studies was conducted in China, and it found that older people with negative attitudes towards aging had an almost 20% higher likelihood of dying over a 6-year period than those with more positive self-perceptions. Ageism is also associated with poorer physical and mental health, including the onset of depression, and it's also associated with riskier health behaviors such as smoking, drinking alcohol excessively, or not taking prescribed medication. If we look at well-being, we also see that ageism is associated with a lower quality of life and that it increases the risk of social isolation and loneliness. But ageism doesn't only affect us as individuals, and here we already, as I just mentioned, see that it is incredibly harmful. Ageism also limits our ability to benefit from what both younger and older people can contribute. It erodes solidarity between generations and has serious economic consequences for individuals and for society at large. Ageism is harmful in itself, but it also exacerbates other forms of disadvantage, making the effects on our health and well-being even worse. But the main message of the report is actually very optimistic, and this is what I want to emphasize also in this presentation. We know that we can combat ageism and that we can all do something about it. There are 3 strategies that work in addressing ageism or eliminating it, as you see on this slide. These include policy and law, educational activities, and intergenerational interventions. In the next few slides, I will briefly describe what each of these interventions entails so that you get a better idea on how they work and what they entail. So if we start with policy and law, this strategy allows us to address discrimination and inequality on the basis of age and to protect the human rights of everyone everywhere. What's very important here is to emphasize that this strategy can be used to reduce or eliminate ageism against any age group. And beyond the drafting and the adoption of policy and law, it's also incredibly important for this type of intervention to count with specific mechanisms to help implement and monitor policies and laws to make sure that these are actually effectively implemented. And these types of mechanisms can include things like human rights agencies or courts, ombudspersons, or equality bodies or other types of bodies that help to uphold treaties. The second strategy is educational activities, and these help to enhance empathy, to dispel misconceptions about different age groups, and to reduce prejudice and discrimination, prejudice and stereotypes by providing accurate information and counter stereotypical examples. They can be included in all types and levels of education and in both formal and non-formal education. Educational activities can have very diverse formats. They can include instruction that transmits information, knowledge and skills, and they can also include things like role-playing, simulation, and virtual reality, which can help enhance empathy. These are among the most effective strategies for reducing ageism against older people, but we don't know that much about their effectiveness in reducing ageism against younger populations. So this is clearly an area that warrants further research. And the last strategy that we know works in reducing ageism is intergenerational interventions, which basically bring together younger and older people to work cooperatively on a common task or area of interest, be it gardening, art, sharing stories, or engaging in other types of activities that they may enjoy, like singing. These are among the most effective interventions to reduce ageism against older people, and they also show a lot of promise in reducing ageism against younger people. Where possible, the report advocates for these three evidence-based interventions to be implemented together to maximize impact. Now, the report not only focuses on those interventions that work in reducing ageism, but it also concludes with 3 recommendations that we can use and must use to end ageism. The first one, of course, is to implement and scale the 3 interventions that prevent and address ageism, and which I just presented. The second key recommendation is to improve our data and research to gain a much better understanding of ageism and how to reduce it. And finally, the report recommends that we change the narrative around age and aging to create much more accurate narratives. I already talked about the first recommendation, but let me also give you some insights on the next 2 recommendations. In terms of improving data and research, the report outlines chapter by chapter opportunities to advance research in this area and cover existing gaps. As a first, it is essential that the same conceptual framework that is used in the report and which is the result of a decades-long process of refinement is used in research efforts moving forward. This will allow cross-cultural comparisons of research and practice, and it will make it much easier for us to conduct further research and bring all of that research together in the coming years. It is also important that more and better qualitative and quantitative research is conducted, especially in low and middle income countries where there are major gaps. And finally, you will see at the bottom of the slide some key areas that warrant further study and which include things like conducting more studies on the prevalence and distribution of all forms of ageism against older and younger people and in different institutional settings. There's also a need for more research on intersectionality and how age, for example, intersects with other forms of disadvantage. as well as more studies on the impact of ageism, especially against younger people, where there's only a handful of studies available. And another one that I would like to mention is the need for more studies on the 3 effective strategies that I mentioned. A lot could be done through implementation research, for example, to explore the barriers to and the facilitators of sustained large-scale implementation, as well as more studies to better understand, for example, the promising strategies that are presented in the report, which include things like campaigns. And in terms of building a movement to change the narrative, let me just say that we all have a role to play here. Culture is fluid. Just look at the change that women have experienced in the last decades. If we all take action to challenge ageism, to combat ageism when we see it, we will be able to change the existing negative narrative. And to enable everyone to continue the global conversation that we kicked off when we launched the report on the 18th of March of this year, we have produced a living toolkit that includes key messages about ageism, a guide for generating conversations, a guide to help anyone organize an event on ageism, PowerPoint presentations, a wide range of communication assets, including social media tiles, infographics, stickers, filters, all to be used with the campaign hashtag A World for All Ages, and all to be used by anyone out there who really wants to contribute to the change that we want to see to create this world for all ages. So I do encourage you to go and access the resources that we have produced beyond the report so that you can help contribute to the change. So just to summarize, ageism affects us all. Ageism is everywhere. Ageism is harmful, but ageism can be combated. We are really hoping that you join the movement to help create a world for all ages, and that you're part of the change that we hope to see in the coming years. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fuente, for your great presentation and your wonderful overview of the World Health Organization's work in combating ageism throughout the world. Thank you very much, and a reminder to participants today to post their questions in the chat pane. We're keen to get as many questions prior to the panel coming together, so I'd encourage you to post your questions early. It's my great pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Professor Katsuya Iijima from the University of Tokyo. Welcome, Professor. By way of introduction, Professor acts as the director at the Institute of Gerontology and is the professor in the Institute for Future Initiatives. He is also an intellectual private sector board member of the National Assembly of Dynamic Engagement for all citizens. He has special interests in the prevention of frailty and the need for integrated community-based care systems. Welcome, Professor, and look forward to your presentation. Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. So thank you for Chairman, Mr. Anne. And so, first of all, so I want to say all of you, so I'm very glad to have a great opportunity to join this wonderful forum. So today, so I want to talk about my titles, multifaceted action research for frailty prevention to achieve healthy aging and well-being. So first of all, so I want to show you the background first. So first one is globally, so life expectancy is rising, and especially in East Asia, including Japan as well. And second point is a huge gap between average life expectancy and healthy life expectancy is remained. So average 10 years. So as you can see in the right lower panels. And then, so third one is Japan is promoting the bottom up of two policies. First one is a long-term care insurance system and community-based integrated care system. And then, so this with these backgrounds, I will be necessary. It will be necessary to reinforce the system for frailty prevention. Okay. And then, so this slide shows our challenge, two important ways of frailty prevention approach to achieve healthy and active aging. First one, so as you can see in the left panel, so I can explain the first approach for the individuals. So in detail, so first one is we need bottom up their a nation's healthy literacy and raise self-awareness more. And third one is continuity is very important but very difficult. And then so fourth one is correspondence for the in different layers. And so in other words, lacking interest. And then so I want to move the light panel. So second approach is community lead designing. So first one is environment surrounding life greatly influence our health. And then so as you know, so improvement of the health of the nation by changing the environment. And then so we now focusing on the community lead designing. Okay. And then so this slide shows the model image of frailty. So we have already launched the new concept of frailty as Japanese strategic concept. So this frailty concept contains three elements. Number one, number two, number three. So first one is frailty is mid-portion between the healthy condition and in other words, robust and need of nursing care. So mid-portion. And second one is a reversibility. So the remaining functions, abilities are able to return, so restored to by proper intervention appropriate to the time. And third one is frailty has a multifaceted factors, multifaceted elements. So as you can see in the right upper panel, so you know, so most strong and most famous image of frailty is multiple decline in various physical functions, so-called physical frailty. In addition, so we have to consider other factors such as mental frailty and or cognitive frailty. So this cognitive frailty means MCI, mild cognitive impairment with physical frailty. And then so decline in sociality and sociability. We can call the social frailty. So the most typical and representative phenotype of physical frailty is locomotive syndrome and sarcopenia. And then so mental frailty is depressive. And just now, so it has been recognized. I'm sorry. And then, so you know, so these factors, these three multifaceted frailty. So these factors get worse with negative spirals. Okay. And then, so today, so I have no enough time to show you our scientific data evidences. So I'm going to skip our data, and then so I want to emphasize our concept of frailty prevention, especially in the community setting. And then so from our research, so to achieve the early prevention of frailty due to sarcopenia, so I guess these three pillars, so the trinity for health and longevity is indispensable. And then so in concrete, so three pillars is the first one is a nutrition, including a diet, food intake, including protein and vitamin D and so on, and oral healthy oral functions. And then, so second one is physical activities, including the social daily activities, exercise, and so on. So my research team is focusing on the NEAT, N-E-A-T, NEAT. So NEAT means non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So because the most of elderlies maybe cannot continue the strong and vigorous exercise. Therefore, so our team is pushing our approach to promote the NEAT levels. So non-exercise activity, so daily daily activity. And then so third one is social participation. So as you can see in the right upper panels, so third one is social participation, including so employment, so leisure activities, and volunteering, and the gathering in the gathering place, and so on. And then so so we would like to let the older people raise self-awareness and awareness building. So regarding the importance of three pillars, the trinity, to prevent sarcopenia-related frailty from earlier phases. Okay, and then so this slide shows our latest action research. So step by step. So you can see in this slide, so from number 1 to 2 and 3, and the latest action is number 4. So first one means so we are conducting the large-scale longitudinal cohort study named the Katsuya study. So and then so from our scientific evidences, so we have already developed this frailty check activity conducted by healthy elderly supporters only. So so this in this place, so medical professionals, there are no medical professionals, so healthy elderly supporters only. And then so just now, so as you can see in the number 3, so I'm extending throughout Japan. Just now, so the current condition is so 73 municipalities is enrolling this citizen supporters activities. And then so number 4 means academia and industries collaboration. So I want to show you this number 4, academia and industries collaboration in detail. So in the latest slide. So today, so I cannot show you short movie, so because I have no enough time, so I can show you a couple of photographs. This one and this one and this one. So light green T-shirts. Elderly citizen supporters is wearing this light green T-shirts. Yes. Okay. And then in this slide, so I can show you the number 4, academia and the industry's collaboration. In the next slide. Okay, so this slide shows the activation of the industry fields for frailty prevention. This collaboration with academia and local governments. So you can see in this slide, so frailty checkup activity is conducted in, for example, Aeon company. And so this Aeon company is very, very famous and large-scale shopping center in Japan. So you know, so this our team is pushing the multifaceted approach to prevent the frailty, sarcopenia based frailty from earlier stage. So we are trying to raise the awareness, self-awareness of frailty prevention, and then so this academia industries collaboration. And then so as a second topics, so I can show you the senior job working. So how can we promote the senior job working for the second life after retirement? So to support their second life, so we have to develop the stable and convenient platform for senior working. And then this slide shows various ways of their worthwhile jobs. So if we push this various ways of their worthwhile jobs, so I guess we have to consider the very kinds of important factors such as place problem and diversity and its job matching system. So these factors are essential, so I guess. Okay, so this slide is a last slide in my presentation. So today, so I present you all regarding our dynamic challenge of action research. Just now, so I'm focusing on the redesigning the community to achieve healthy aging and well-being. So as you can see in the upper panel, so our challenge contains at least 3 viewpoints. So first one is the extension of healthy span, and the second one is independent support care and long-term care. And the third one, so today's my talk is focusing on the number 3. So third one is a construction of social infrastructure. So you know, so today I emphasize the 2 factors. First one is a lifestyle modification via the bottom up of self-awareness for health. And second one is an improvement of the health of the nation by changing the environment. So in this slide, so I can emphasize again the importance of the community development. In details, so for example, so social factors, including the social network and the social participation and social support and so on. And then, so other important factors contains the gathering place and senior job working and support each other and live together in their mind. And then, so movement assisting and so on. And finally, so I can emphasize the again the importance of interdisciplinary collaborations between the municipal government and the industries and almost citizens, of course, and last one is researchers and universities. Yes, so that is all. So in my talk. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor, for a very comprehensive report. And we look forward to you joining us for panel in a short while. We've got a number of questions that have come through the panel and through our website. So I ask people to continue to post those, and many of those questions, Professor, will be looking at challenging you with on the panel. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Okay.
Our last presentation, thank you. Our last presentation today is from the UK, and it's my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Miss Catherine Wilson. Catherine is the head for employers of carers for the Carers UK. Employers for Carers, or EFC, is a membership service and a forum for employers committed to developing good practice to support the 1 in 7 people who are caring for older, disabled, or seriously ill family members or friends. Managed and supported by specialist knowledge of Carers UK, the forum provides practical help and advice to employers and promotes the business benefits of supporting carers. Ms. Wilson's expertise is in the field of employment and equity policy, where she has experience working across public, private, and voluntary sectors. On joining Carers UK in 2007, she worked on the development of the EFC and was its initial manager when it launched as an employer membership forum in 2009. It's now on its 10th anniversary, which happened in 2019, and EFC launched Carer Confident, a UK-wide employer benchmarking scheme dedicated to carer support. It's my pleasure to welcome you on board today, Catherine, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Anne, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. And it was really interesting to hear the previous speakers, really fascinating. So I'm going to actually cover here 3 key things. Just firstly, a bit about who are carers and some latest key facts about carers. Secondly, about the impact of COVID on carers, including some global stats. And then thirdly, a bit more about the impact of COVID on people who've been balancing work and care in the UK, where my work is focused. So just to start about, who are carers? Sometimes it's called caregiving in different parts of the world. Sometimes it's called caring. But carers basically look after loved ones who are older, disabled, or seriously ill. We know that caring can affect anyone at any age, at any time, and can last a lifetime. And you can be caring for older parents, maybe a sibling or a partner who becomes ill, or else your child who's disabled. So it's a very, very broad definition. And at Carers UK, as Anna says, we are a UK charity. We're here to make life better for carers. We were established in 1965. and we're an organisation of and for carers, and we give free expert advice, information and support to carers. We connect carers so that no one feels they have to care alone. It can often feel very isolating and stressful when you're caring. We campaign together for lasting change for carers, and we innovate to find new ways to reach and support carers. And one of the ways that we do that is indeed through our Employers for Carers forum, which Anne mentioned we established in 2009 as a membership forum. We're growing and growing, and we've also got an increasing number of global members as well. So we're really getting insights from employers about supporting employees who are carers across the world in their workforce. So caring is very much a global issue, and we know from research in the International Alliance of Carers Organisations, IACO, that even before the pandemic, there were huge numbers of carers globally. We haven't got a precise figure, but we know from IACO's research that there was pre-pandemic around 700 million carers globally, but that number is likely to underestimate the real numbers of carers. We also know from our work in Eurocarers that 80% of care in Europe is provided by families and friends. So the role that carers play is very big indeed. We also know that by 2050 globally, 3 times more people of working age will be looking after 2 billion ageing family members. So just really important, I think, to reflect from what we've heard from the previous speakers as well about the ageing population, and also the fact that more people will be working for longer very often, maybe because pension ages are increasing, and so more people will be balancing work and care. And interesting to see also that pre-pandemic research by Merck in 7 countries here, Australia, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, the UK and the USA, found that 55% of carers feel that their physical and mental health has suffered as a result of caring. But of course, now we're coming on to the huge impact of the pandemic. So the second part of what I want to cover today is about the impact of COVID on carers. So the numbers were already big, but new research from Merck since the pandemic has shown that COVID-19 has thrust many family members and others into the caring role for the first time. So 1 in 5 unpaid carers across the globe, according to their research, started their responsibilities as carers as a result of the pandemic. And so this shows the figures across 12 different countries. So looking at the average overall, that was 1 in 5 carers who were actually starting their caring responsibilities as a result of the pandemic. So really big numbers. And then looking at these first-time carers, these people who have come into caring for the first time, what was interesting from Merck's research was that they tend to be a bit younger than previous carers, and they tend to be parents rather than non-parents. So often juggling double caring roles, looking after their children while also maybe caring for an elderly parent or their partner. So that was quite an interesting finding that we thought when we noticed that. And then also new research by Merck has also found that globally carers are providing a higher level of care with even greater impacts on their health and well-being. So what was interesting from their research is that globally more people are caring, and also globally more carers are doing more caring as well. So there's an additional pressure there. And I just want to show you the 2 carers organisations that we work with very closely. So Eurocarers, this is their website, is the European platform of organisations supporting carers and includes every member state. And we're very pleased that the UK is to still be members. We very much support Eurocarers. We were one of the founding members, and it does really good work to support carers across Europe. And also IACO, the International Alliance of Carer Organisations, which is an alliance of organisations working on behalf of carers across the world and has many members and associate members covering many countries in different continents, and is a really important source of information and support. I just want to do my third part of my presentation just to focus particularly on the impact of COVID on working carers in the UK, those of us, and I speak as one personally, who are balancing work and care. We found in the UK too that the pandemic had a massive impact on caring. So we launched last year in June some research during our annual Carers Week campaign about the numbers of carers during the coronavirus outbreak. And we found that more people were caring, the majority of the new carers were working as well as caring, and that carers were saying they were stressed and exhausted. In the UK, we found that in our population, up to 13.6 million people were caring. That was around 1 in 4 of the adult population, up from around 1 in 6. So we knew that millions of people really became carers in a matter of weeks after the pandemic started. If I break down those figures a bit more, so of the new carers, the new 4.5 million carers within that wider figure, the majority of those, 2.8 million, were working and caring. So it was, in a sense, a similar story as the global stats. And probably not surprisingly, 70% of carers were saying that caring was having a negative impact on their physical and mental health, particularly if not supported. We also in the UK did some research about the impact of COVID on existing carers. So this was new carers, but here, looking at existing carers, we did 2 pieces of research. These are all on our website, about caring behind closed doors. So we did this last year. The first piece was in April, the second research was in October, and we found that 81% of carers were providing more care as a result of the pandemic. And this was interesting because it was a cumulative impact, because when we did the earlier bit of research in April, we found that 70% were providing more care, but by October it was 81%, so it was growing and growing. And interesting to see that 78% of carers were saying they were caring for someone whose support needs had increased as a result of the pandemic. And very often this was because of the pandemic's impact on existing care and support services, and that people were not only having to care for those who may have contracted COVID or were self-isolating, but also caring for people whose usual care and support wasn't available. So that was having an impact on the carer. And about 2/3 of carers were saying they'd not had a break and that they'd had worse mental health as a result. We also saw the impacts on work. So 11% of carers that we surveyed reported that they had reduced their working hours, and 9% had given up work to care. And the biggest factor in this was care services being closed or reduced. It was interesting that 48% of carers, almost half of carers, said that affordable and accessible replacement care or access to quality day and support services would have helped them to stay in work or return to work. So the impact of services is really massive on the workplace. And then this year in Carers Week in June, we published a report, Breaks or Breakdown, which showed that 75% of working carers were saying they were exhausted and 55% were saying they were overwhelmed by their caring role. And of course, it's had a really cumulative effect as the pandemic has continued. And out of all carers surveyed, 72% were saying they'd not had any breaks in the pandemic. That's a huge figure when you think how long the pandemic's been going. And so that is why we published our report, to make the case for carers to have breaks and for this to be properly funded. I'm going to just conclude with just looking at strategies for building resilience to help people to work and care. And that is obviously a key part of our work at Carers UK. I mean, we've never been so busy, as I'm sure has been the case for many organisations at this time. We did a survey of our member organisations at Employers for Carers, which was published in November, about how they were supporting their staff during COVID-19. And we found that 9 out of 10 employers responding said they put in place additional arrangements to support carers' health and well-being. And often that was about being really explicit and direct in communicating to staff how they could get health and wellbeing support. They could go to Carers UK, for example, for free advice and information, and really making caring much more visible in their health and wellbeing policies. And then 75% were offering additional flexible working arrangements, and 42% were offering additional leave arrangements. And in many cases, these were sort of ad hoc, informal arrangements. And it was really the case that the employer was giving permission to line managers to make those decisions, to use their judgment and to be able to support people in their team who were carers. But interestingly, nearly half, 49% of employers responding said they wanted to embed this and establish it in their policies in the longer term. So 49% were saying that they had developed or will develop new policies or procedures as a result of COVID to enhance support for carers. And we're doing a survey at the moment, actually, 1 year on, of our member organisations, which we will also be looking to publish in November. It'll be on our website to just see, you know, how the pandemic is continuing to impact, but also how employers are looking at strategies to support and retain carers in their workplace. And the whole idea of this research is to be able to share insights. So we have shared in the survey report some sort of practical insights and tips really from employers about what has been helping in the workplace. Anne mentioned our Carer Confident benchmark, and so I've just given you the website here. And just to explain that, again, we've never been so busy during the pandemic. I think it's really raised the visibility of caring issues everywhere. And the idea of the benchmark is really to provide a sort of practical framework so organisations can see what good might look like in their workplace and work their way through 3 key levels: active when you start off, then become accomplished when you've actually established the policies and support in your workplace, and then an ambassador when you're really promoting it and going the extra mile, or going the extra kilometre, I should say, to really make that happen and be a beacon for other employers as well. And just here is our criteria. We developed this criteria really through all the years that we've worked with employers about what was working in the workplace, what employers are saying makes a difference. So this has become our 5 Ps, which are our criteria, which we use consistently across the 3 levels of the benchmark. But obviously we get more and more robust and more challenging as we go to the 3rd level, ambassador. So it's around preparation, policy and guidance, practical support, peer support, helping to connect carers with each other, and promoting support. So you can look at that on the website, and hopefully it gives just a very top line framework about what could work, and it's really applicable in whatever size organisation you are in and whatever sector you're in as well, and very much driven and based on the very practical experience of employers in our Employers for Carers forum. And then lastly, one of the key things that employers can really do is obviously signpost to support practical help for caring, because of course employers can't be expected to be experts in care, but by signposting to organisations like Carers UK that provide free support and advice for carers, that can really help make a difference. So I'm just showing you there our website, just to really capture that Carers UK covers really every aspect of caring. Obviously, caring can often cover every aspect of our lives. So if anyone's a carer, they can actually look at any of these categories of information and support and find free downloadable resources. They can also connect with Carers UK and join free and join an online forum to get tips and support from other carers. And one of the key things we also did on the left-hand side there is provide some interactive, very simple tools so that carers could just come to our website and, for example, type in a key issue around their own caring situation and then get a response which helps them to navigate the information and think about next steps. And my backup there was something we specifically developed really from after feedback from carers during the pandemic, because of the need to have a contingency plan, because so many of us were having to adapt our plans and change because of the impact of the pandemic. So having a backup plan, and this is a very simple free tool that helps carers to do that. So I'm just going to conclude by saying, you know, what are the benefits really of supporting carer resilience in the workplace? So the benefits reported really to us by employers and by individuals who are caring is very much a win-win. And so I've gone through the 5 Ps earlier. So just to end on 4 Rs of the business benefits: improved recruitment, improved retention of staff, improved resilience of staff. So obviously when carers are supported, they feel less stressed and report better well-being. And finally, improved results. And I think once employers engage with this, they absolutely see that it's a no-brainer, and that if they ignore the issue, it will have very adverse impacts. But if they address the issue, it has real benefits. So I'm going to just conclude there with our contact details. So all of that research and information is freely available on the Carers UK website and also on the Employers for Carers website. And I'm going to stop there. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for your presentation today. It's now our opportunity for all our presenters to come together in a panel discussion. Some of our presenters, Britta Berge is unable to join us for this panel, but I know that I'm very confident between Nele and myself that we'll be able to answer any questions around TC314, Ageing Society's work. I welcome back Professor, and I welcome back Catherine and Nele. And I'd also like to introduce from the United Nations, who's come on board to help us with question time. So I'll just look forward to introducing our representative from the United Nations. Welcome, Vânia and Vânia, your expertise in the United Nations on our panels is most welcome, and I thank you for your involvement in this evening. By way of introduction, since 2010, she's been the Chief in Population Affairs for the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. I understand, Dr. you're currently located in Geneva and bring that perspective from Europe. In her work, she focuses on population aging, generations, and gender, population and development. A warm welcome, Doctor. Thank you for joining us today on today's panel. So now it's our time to all be involved in some question time, either related to the presentations that you've seen today or general comments around ageing societies globally and the opportunities for standardization and global approaches. Behind the scenes here, I've been a bit inundated by questions, so I will be taking them in no particular order, and thank everyone for posting their questions on the question pane and sending those in to us tonight. Look, I'll ask some questions first to Catherine, perhaps of you. There's lots of questions that have come from your presentation around carers. A colleague of ours from Canada, I believe, has a number of questions as a carer himself, and he's asking, for carer confident, what is the distribution of care level achieved? What kind of feedback on success do you get from carers?
Thank you very much for that question. So Carer Confident is still a relatively new benchmark. We launched it in 2019 and we've had 36 employers so far taking one of the levels. So it's still very early days, but I would say that there's a real mixture really of good support at different levels. One of the key things is having a dedicated carers policy or carers charter to make the support really upfront. And another key way that organisations are supporting carers is connecting them through things like employee resource groups or staff networks, obviously very often online at the moment, but really connecting carers up so that they can share expertise and tips with each other, because often that's the most helpful thing you can have as a carer, is to speak to someone else who's going through it as well. So just to give you an example, we will be publishing, as the benchmark develops more, case studies on our website. We've already got 1 or 2 short ones, but it's still relatively new work at the moment.
Thank you, Catherine. I've got a question, Nele, for both you and Britta. Comment from one of our attendees today. Thank you, Nele and Britta. Your presentations were inspirational. I want to be involved in international standards. What type of roles are there and how do I get engaged and involved?
Good question. I didn't cover that, so that's good. So if you want to be involved, it depends at which level. So you can either choose to be involved at the national level, which means that you sit on the mirror committee that feeds into the international work. That gives you a chance to comment on the drafts at the different development stages that I showed earlier. And that is not as involved. So you can do that easily with, let's say, a few hours in the month to give feedback to the different documents. If you want to be more at the front line, you can actually join the international group themselves, so the different working groups that are developing the standards. So that still goes through the national committee, mirror committee, but you actually get put onto that working group through your national body to actually actively participate. So that's a bit more involved. So you'll be involved in like monthly meetings, or if there needs to be redrafting of certain parts of the document, they might ask you to help with that, help with resolving the comments that are coming from the national bodies. So that's a lot more involved. If you're not interested in the national side of things, you can also consider joining as a liaison partner, which is at a higher level. So they don't get voting rights in that sense, but they can provide feedback or expertise in the development of standards. So if you're interested in any of those directions of taking part, you can come into contact with me or have a look on our website. And then we can go through the different criteria of what some countries might require or require to become a liaison partner. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much, Nele. Professor,
Yes.
a number of questions about your presentation. What changes or activities can we suggest in local communities for increasing healthy aging? I was interested to see the multifaceted frailty factors that you showed. Which factor do you think we can more easily influence, and what kind of activities can families start to do to support their older relatives better?
Yeah, so so physical in my presentations, I mentioned the frailty concept contains at least 3 kinds of elements. So physical frailty, and mental and cognitive frailty, and social frailty. So first influencing factor is of course so physical factors, including what disease, what so health problems so the persons have. And then so in from our research evidences, and I guess so social factors is very essential and so very important to maintain the lifestyle level and yes, activity levels in the older peoples. Therefore, so our team is focusing on and pushing the multifaceted interventions regarding social factors. Yes, that's right. That's it. Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Vitalia, we're very interested in your work and population aging, generations, and particularly gender. The participant today would like to hear what particular global issues do you think are the most significant for this generation and gender? Thank you.
I think we heard already from actually all speakers mentioning that it is important, this intergenerational aspect here. The same for the carers, the same for the combating ageism, the same for also for working on frailty and working with the volunteers. So this is intergenerational element for the questions on aging. It's one of our core elements in our policy frameworks. But I would say we work at the UNECE, we work on the international frameworks, policy frameworks. And these are the core frameworks that I think any standard by now also have to take into account, like Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, which was 2002 major component. Later on, some new frameworks were developed. Let's say we have newer framework that we today heard mentioning about the global strategy on aging and health, from which developed the decade on healthy aging for 2021, 2030, providing some core elements where to go ahead, and also the Combating Ageism campaign. Generations and gender element here, it's actually an important part, because what we're asking to be gender responsive, age responsive, and to see that there is a solidarity and there is no, throughout the life course, there is no impact on the other generations. Because if we just go for the younger generation or just for the older generation, we may impact the later life course. So it's life course approach. Our core position these days is mainstreaming aging into all policy areas, and mainstreaming aging in two levels, taking into account individual aging trajectories, but also societal aging. So these are two elements, they have to be merged, and then they affect each structures, employers, each stakeholders, let's say, but also any sector. And that's where we work. We have a special program on generations and gender, and this is more research-oriented program that we work with 16 leading institutes or demographic or the sociological institutes. And these are based on the longitudinal studies. I can provide the link to this group of people who are working, and their intergenerational and gender relations within the family, not only at the societal level, but also within the family, are looked into. And this is with the perspective that we don't want women or other gender be more impacted than the opposite gender. So this is a part of the reducing gender inequalities. Coming back to UN, it would be 2030 agenda on sustainable development and goal 5 on the gender equality. Just briefly on that.
Thank you very much, Doctor. It brings into a real focus the strategic work that Nele indicated that the International Standards Organization is looking at in the future around multi-generational communities. And Nele, I wondered if you wanted to talk further about that.
So that project will take into account different stakeholder research. So it will look at projects from all over the world, hopefully, that will feed in some practical advice that they have seen working to generate a community that is multi-generational. So what kind of services can we look to introduce? So one interesting example that was shown at the last event is a community in Japan where the older population, rather than being in a care facility, is surrounded by everybody else. So they work in the same cafeteria so that people can come together from all these different communities and spend time together. Or even you have office buildings where maybe a care facility is underneath the building. So someone that has a child might leave the child there. So there's the real community between the older person and the really young children living together. So it just brings a different perspective of how we currently live with such divided spaces. So the older person might be there, the young person might be there, but it's very unlikely that they will be spending a lot of time together. So I think that's what we want to see changing. And so I look forward to seeing what the different projects bring to this as practical advice. It's a bit early to say exactly what it will look like, but hopefully it will give some good suggestions.
Thank you, Nele. Now, I address this issue to all our panelists. And so one of our participants asked, what can we as individuals on a micro level to participate and commit to challenging ageism and to make the situation for older people more sustainable and successful?
I think one has to go back to previous presentation on the global report and remember that these are not just discrimination, not just against, but it is also self-inflicted kind of perspective of the ageism. And there what individual can start with, I would say, and the local already start with yourself. Don't think only about aging as a debilitating, as the kind of that makes you feel worse, that you don't want to be. I remember always a very famous demographer, Professor Vopel, who said, oh, we all want to live until 100 at least, long, but we don't want to be old. That's the thing that this kind of inhibits us also. And we, with this attitude, we often also limit us. So this is one step forward to stop thinking only in the negative part. But when you stop thinking in the negative way, you also try to not to do it, overdo it in the positive. But positive images of older persons and aging are important elements. And these positive images have to be not too removed from reality. One has to find the good examples that also balance with the let's say, frailty, that are balanced with the cares problems and etc. But that they have to give this possibility that we can overcome it. And then it comes to the further, to the higher levels, to the leaders of the community, to the municipality, making the environment age-friendly, working together. One of the main things is, again, coming back to Vânia's presentation on the global aging report, I would say was this intergenerational aspect, that you have to work in intergenerational possibilities. They have the common work, as Professor said, work the gardening together, or some, it's something that can be together. So these are the local level can be done, and really recognize the contribution of persons who with age still contribute to society. They may contribute through the working, they may contribute when they participate as volunteers, when they go to vote. So political participation, when they participate also with the family caring, but also even those who are not able to be very active, if they manage to give positive, let's say, semi-independent life for themselves, and then see, well, so they also contribute to society. So this contribution is very important to see. And you know, from the example of what we do, we have this active aging index, so-called, which is looking at all these 4 elements that are integrated together and with the enabling environment. So this is shortly what I can suggest.
Thank you very much, Dr. Professor, a couple of questions about your study. Were individuals involved in your study? Did they include persons with non-communicable chronic disease?
Okay, so okay, so in our study named the Katsuya study, longitudinal course study. So we have already checked the detailed medical information, including so NCD. So for example, lifestyle related disease and malignancy and degenerative joint disease and so on. And then so we analyzed some Frailty programs, so using adjustment of so medical information and so on. Yes.
Thank you. Another question from a local colleague of mine, Robin Robinson, who's a great consumer advocate for aging and chairs a very active local aging group. Professor, she asks, are older people paid to be involved in your senior job working program?
Okay, so you know, so I mentioned the two topics in my presentations. First one is frailty prevention citizen activities from the evidence-based frail check program. And then, so independently, so I can show the second topics regarding the senior job workings. So basically, so two factors is independent. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. The theme throughout everyone's presentation was also around meaningful work for older people. And I'll open it to the panel. I've got some questions from Dr. Sabrina Pitt, who chairs our working group 1. And she really points to the development of the standard and how important that's going to be for organisations dealing with older workers and workers that as they age want meaningful work, not trivial work. Just open to the panel for any comments about how important global standardisation is in respect to older workers, given that we also have, hopefully when we come out of COVID, we have a very mobile workforce between some countries, particularly where that workforce provides care arrangements to older people in other countries. I'll open that to the panel. Catherine, you're nodding there, so I might start with you.
Yes, thank you, Anne. It's a really good point. So I think absolutely the standards are very important internationally. I mean, not only do we have a growing number of global employers, but obviously a lot of us are also moving around, as you said, Anne, but also maybe caring for loved ones in different countries, or, you know, so the fact is that we're often caring at a distance or supporting family members and friends at a distance. So that makes that international aspect really important.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to comment? Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, you know, making a standard for meaningful employment, I find it a bit strange. How meaningful means to each of the person is a different meaning. It might be the most trivial job that make a big meaning for some person, as long as he or she can have it, and as long as she or he can perform it, because it was something that for them makes meaning. So I wouldn't go, but for standards for longer working or working when you are older, it's an important element. And I think here it's the core elements are working conditions, flexibility of the employers, we talked about the combining care and necessity, and also the working, but also lifelong learning, giving a possibility of the also career in the older age, because often what comes with the older, working in the older age, you are stuck mostly on the same level and you don't have these possibilities, or you are not even included or considered for the lifelong learning or for the some promotional events. So these are things that have to be included. Actually, now we are at the UNECE, we are preparing for the ministerial conference that ministers will gather next year of our region of 56 countries, and they usually discuss the matters. This will be on the joining forces for solidarity and equal opportunities throughout life. It's a life course. And we're now currently discussing the possible declaration of ministers. And what came into it very strongly from many participants, that working conditions, that improvement of working conditions over the last decade really helped to increase the life expectancy, healthy life expectancy. This is an element that we often forget. We talk about medical advances, we talk about some welfare, but not the working conditions improved over 10 years, thanks to the, let's say, safety, occupational safety and health standards that were introduced. This is a very core and important element. And there I think another some kind of standard on the working in older age might help as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stay with you, Doctor. Just another question. Do you have any observations on the harm caused by silent ageism? I've seen this in my own workplace and have also experienced it. And this is from our colleague in Canada who's been very involved in standards development, I think, because of the experiences he's had personally.
In our work in the UNEC, we also produce a series of policy briefs that address specific issues and are based on the good practices, but also about the concerns and challenges. And one of the policy briefs was on the on the ageism in the workplace. We've seen the abuse, even, let's say, of the older workers. These things happen. There are some research done. And as I said, this ageism element is pervasive, actually, in the working place often. And at all levels, starting with hiring and ending with firing. You take from the beginning to the end. But there are good movements there. And I think this improving working conditions, making work-life balance elements into it. It's a European Union countries moved forward with a directive for that making necessary that each country promotes it and includes paid leave for the time being 7 days, maybe 14 days later, but it's already the beginnings out there are important parts. And that, I think, when the government, together with some support of the other organizations like employers, organizations, trade unions, social partners, work together towards that, it is a helpful element.
Thank you.
And yeah, I would suggest to look at our policy briefs. You can find this kind of stuff.
Thank you. Professor, I believe you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, so it is likely that so I have one question. So from Livingstone. So the older people is paid to be involved in senior job working. So I guess so I have to answer these questions. So they having this senior job workings paid the minimum wage, but so in other case, so you know, so I am cultivating the citizen frailty supporters wearing light green t-shirts. So they are not paid. Yes. So I mean no fee. So because so therefore so I guess we have to set up the variety of the student support activities. And yes.
Thank you, Professor. I have another question for you. What are the tools for measuring healthy life expectancy?
Healthy life expectancy. Okay. So in Japan, so we can check the detailed time of certification of needed long-term care using long-term care long-term care insurance records, and therefore so healthy life expectancy is systematically estimated by the date when so the persons were certificated needed LTC. So okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. A couple of questions for you, Catherine. I think you might have answered some of these directly through the chat pane, but for other viewers, are there any practical training for new carers, especially working carers, that Carers UK have developed?
Thank you for that question. So yes, there are. So on the Carers UK website, it was the addresses at my last slide. We do have some training programs. We launched one recently called Learning for Living. So it's free for carers and it's aimed at helping people capture the skills and experience they've gained through caring and thinking about how they might apply those to stay in work or return to work, or indeed for just lifelong, you know, learning or volunteering or whatever, but just to recognise caring skills. And we also have other courses like looking after your own health and well-being as a carer, and organisations like Open Learn and Learn Direct also have generic courses, but some of those are also about caring as well. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Catherine. I've got a question around assistive and enabling technologies, and I'll throw it open to the panel because I think this, Nele, is also an area of interest for future standards development for TC314 ageing societies. But there's a growing body of evidence that our participants, a couple of our participants have indicated where assistive and enabling technologies that are emerging in the marketplace and now readily available are assisting older people to live more engaged and more active lives. And I guess Professor Japan is a great example of the adoption of robotics and care assistance, etc., for older people. And with a global shortage of direct care workers, what role do you see the role that these technologies can or will play, and particularly the role needed for standardization of the products? Shall I go to you, Nele, first?
Yeah, it's an important question. I think there's a lot of things that we can still do with standardization. I think there's not that many guidelines available yet on designing products specifically for an older person, and especially in a setting that, yeah, for instance, one house that can suit you for life rather than adjusting your house in later life. So I think with that project that we're working on with the multi-generational neighborhoods, that is something that we can look at, that it's going to be functional for all stages of life and it will look nice. So that's also important. In terms of robotics and that kind of aspects of it, I don't know anything specific yet because no proposals have come in. So I don't know if anybody else on the panel has specific information, what kind of standardization we can do in that respect.
So I guess, Doctor, has the United Nations done any work in this area of aging and the use of technologies?
We were addressing this question through several lenses, let's say. One thing, how it improves carers, also formal as informal carers, working how it facilitates caring and also supports all the persons living in the semi-independently or independently, keeping them being autonomous to a certain point. This is a very good development, and we had several good practices and 3 policy briefs that address these matters. But now we are more concerned about human rights aspect of it. And also it's difficult to standardize this element, but invasive assistive technology or without the consent use of assistive technology, surveillance of all the people movements, and you know, this is a very delicate part, and ethical aspects are extremely important. So that's where we kind of more now focusing a little bit. And the latest brief that we just issued in July, this July, on the ageism in the digital era, addresses more the digital technology, but also assistive technology that is used with the digital devices. It has a section on this human rights aspect. So I think these are 2 elements that from our point of view are very important. One thing, it's a support. It's also enabling, empowering all the people to stay longer independent, but on the other hand, when they, especially when they people with dementia, with the cognitive impairments, when they are surveyed without their consent, it's a big question. For us, human rights, it's an important element.
Thank you, Doctor. Professor or Catherine, did you want to add anything to that?
Just to add that it's an incredibly important area. Certainly, we know that carers contact us a lot at Carers UK with these sorts of questions. So we do have a section on our website on technologies and support, just to sort of help explain to people the different sorts of options that might be out there and how you can get them. Because certainly in the UK, many people just don't know where to start. You know, you might understand about getting something for something not care related, but something to perhaps support your mum or dad to live independently. So we try to spread the word, but it's certainly a very important issue and a growing one.
Thank you. So look, that brings us to the close of our question time now. We're right on time, so I would like to thank everyone on our panel today, and just to also thank the speakers that aren't on our panel today. So in no particular order, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Vânia from United Nations. It was magnificent that you could join us this evening today for this session, and we really welcomed your contribution. I'd like to also thank Ms. Britta Berge, Nele, for your ongoing involvement in this development of what I think is going to be a vast range of standards, and probably will see us all out in terms of our workload. And I know that you're always an advocate for younger people to be involved in standards development. So I will call out to anyone on today's link about the importance of standards development. Dr. Vânia de Fuente, I'd like to thank her in her absence from the World Health Organization for her presentation today, raising a really important issue around ageism and our role, each and every one of us individually and collectively, combating ageism and improving the working and living arrangements and conditions for older people globally. Professor, I'd like to thank you particularly for you bringing your insights into prevention of frailty and how active aging can be a realistic dream or reality for all of us if we look after ourselves and take a very preventative approach. Your significant longitudinal study, I think I noted 50,000 participants, is a wonderful endeavour, and we wish you well in that. Thank you for your time tonight. Catherine, you brought a really important perspective of carers in the workplace and carers trying to balance sometimes really competing issues between caring responsibilities, work, home arrangements, and just living. So thank you for that important perspective. I know that all the speakers will be inundated with question times. I thank you for sharing all your contacts. I'd also like to acknowledge the efforts and the expertise of the team in the background led by Miss Georgie Gould. So thank you, Georgie, for your involvement in making everything run smoothly. It's no mean feat to have global speakers coming in and out from all parts of the world and have the technology faultless. So thank you. Finally, I'd like to thank all the participants for today's webinar. I've noticed on the participants pane people from around the globe and some very local to me. So I thank you for your involvement in today and your interest. For more information, I will direct you to our website link, which is at the bottom of the page on the contact list today. But Nele in the communications group, particularly Adriana in our group, of trying to be very active on LinkedIn, and there is our LinkedIn group link as well. Please be engaged in the work of TC314. It's an important global initiative, really aimed at addressing those global challenges that we can all work together collectively to solve and resolve. Thank you everyone for your participation in today's workshop, and I look forward to your involvement in future ones. Thank you everyone. Thank you panelists.
Thank you, Anne.
Very much.
Thank you.